So on that note, I'm going to throw the floor open to the questions. When you ask your question, please can you give your name and affiliation, and if your question's directed to one particular person on the panel, please let me know. I'm going to take them in groups of 2 or 3. Several hands were up already. We've got roving mics around the room with Kate and Sue. So. There was one at the front here. Oh, there's one at the back. Yeah. Okay. Sue?
I'm Jill Poet from the Organisation for Responsible Businesses. There's been quite a big focus on the environmental sustainability rather than a more holistic sustainability. And I think if we're looking at the art of change, we also need to bring our communities into that. So I'd like to ask the panel, how do you think the big corporates can actually get involved with making a change at community level and supporting the local communities?
Thank you. And was there one over here at the back? No? Okay, let's go with that one. Who'd like to take that one first?
Take it in giving our example. I think it's a big question in terms of how can they do it. There's lots of different models and lots of ways to do it. I think there's no doubt that we need to be better engaged, all of us, in our communities, and that a lot of the change will start at that grassroots. We work really hub and spoke, if you like. We started our factories, and we have a factory in Mexico, a big one in Denmark, Czech Republic, and just building one in China. And we do local community engagement, LCE. It sounds very straightforward, but it's about how do we engage with those communities where we work. And maybe it's easy for us. We have quite an interesting medium, so we can do big-scale events with communities. We can challenge them on environmental topics. And then we also have a program that we call Build the Change, and we take that out globally to all kinds of different people, school groups, scout groups, whoever, volunteers, and we ask them to build their version of a sustainable future, and then to write about it and then talk about it. And that's one of the ways that we're trying to build some of that knowledge and that education. But I'm sure there are many others, and we're just actually at the start of that journey. I think it's a very good point to say that we focus a lot on the broader global environment, but then what about the people both in our supply chains and directly connected to our factories and offices as well?
I love that idea of actually physically using the Lego blocks to build a better future. That's a fantastic.
It's great when you get kids to do it, particularly, and you ask. It tends to be the girls actually tends to have horses and puppies and what have it. And he said, this is a horse school, your sustainable school of the future. And then the boys tend to have, this is a fighting school, and you're kind of like, okay, well, somewhere there's a sustainability message in there somewhere.
I'm not saying anything. One over there at the back, Sue.
Sorry, can I just
Richard.
respond to Jill, because I'm conscious that I haven't said anything about communities either, Jill, and I'm feeling pulled up now because you are absolutely right. And I think part of the challenge is this journey towards purpose. If you really get a sense of what your purpose is, then funnily enough, the social stuff starts to emerge and be much more obvious than potentially some of the environmental stuff. And there's a piece of work Screwfix are doing at the moment, because I think you have to get down to what your core purpose is. And they're doing a piece of work that effectively takes all the stuff that BIS would do to help a small tradesman take on an apprentice. But if you're a small tradesman, taking on an apprentice looks like a load of red tape, and the BIS website isn't where you normally go. So they've done a Screwfix guide to apprenticeships. Their mission is to assist the 3 million small tradesmen that shop with them, the plumbers and the electricians, to assist them in taking on apprentices, to drive the number of apprentices up. Now for me, if they can deliver 2, 3, 4, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of apprentices, they will have used the leverage of the right that they have to talk to those tradesmen on a daily basis, and they will have done an important social purpose, and likely to have delivered much more to the community than they would through a philanthropic project in a local, playground in the school next door to one of their stores. So for me, it's once you begin to understand your purpose and your genuine purpose in the organisation, how do you use the whole muscle of the organisation to deliver social purpose, not the little philanthropy muscle that's always ever somewhere less than 1% of pre-tax profits. That's important, but it isn't the thing that's going to drive real social change and really drive the business to understand where its levers are in communities, because they're not as always as obvious as sometimes the CSR department think, or the big pile of letters you get from lots of organisations looking for some form of cash donation.
So really tapping into values which have to be running deep in the organisation for that to play in.
And ideally ones that drive the business model. If Screwfix can train hundreds, thousands of apprentices into the plumbing and electrician industry, they're driving longer term brand loyalty to their organisation, they're increasing the capacity of the tradesmen who shop with them on a daily basis. There's a virtuous circle that drives, yes, employment, yes, bringing more people into the industry, but bringing them into our bit of the industry through us as a trusted provider, which at a place where if you're sitting in biz, getting to a 2 or 3 man plumber somewhere in Macclesfield it's a long way. You don't have the direct line of sight into those sort of organisations.
John, you were...
Well, I just had a reflection, which is that the nature and the meaning of community has changed such a lot. If I think back to when I first started working with what was then called industry in the 1970s, to them, community were the people you're going to blow up if something went wrong in your plant. And now it's Facebook and it's social media and it's the millennials, and you're suddenly linked to very different sorts of communities. Some part of my brain heard that question and think, well, that's result. If people are thinking at times more about the environment than they are about community, that's progress. Because when I first came into this, the communities and the companies and the unions were very often complicit, and the environment really wasn't properly on the agenda. We've always got to balance and rebalance it, but community is changing, and I think we've got to keep up with that.
Sue, sorry, your question has been very patient. Yeah.
It's Greg Roberts from Ramble Environ, a Danish company. I don't normally introduce it as that, so thank you, John. My question is, one of the big barriers I see to change is short-termism, both in terms of how perhaps a company reports, the structure of the company, but equally down to the individual, their short-term pressures, getting a report out and so forth. Just looking for some sort of tips, guidance, things that you've done to overcome that short-termism in your organisation. That's a question open to anyone.
And there was a second one there. Should we take that at the same time? Yep.
Hi, good evening. My name is Gareth Rice from O2. The question I had was around the word innovation, which is something I haven't really talked that much about this evening, but I'm conscious at the start of this conversation we heard about the idea that the sustainability teams need to get more technically competent in order to drive change. And I kind of wondered from the panel's perspective within your own organizations, how much you see your role as a sustainability professional as driving sustainability innovation versus challenging the business to drive sustainability innovation, because our experience within O2 is that often we have had to be that agent for change in sustainability innovation because our colleagues don't really know where to start. Thank you.
So let's take the first one on the timing. It's that short-term pressure question. Tim, you mentioned the power of timing.
Yeah, I think in my experience, timing is absolutely key, and I mentioned it in the talk, coming too early or versus too late. I think targets that we spoke right at the beginning of the conversation help, that longer term target, but critically breaking it down year by year to every 2 years, whatever works. I think it's a hard truth that remuneration is central to what a lot of people do at work. I mean, our CEO is only 20% of his bonus is related to our financial results, which I think helps on our long term. We're also 25% owned by a charitable foundation. So a quarter of our profits go straight over into charity straight away. And that, again, helps in this kind of longer term thinking about what are we trying to do. I think it's very easy to sit in my chair because I think we're very fortunate in the type of business. We have this kind of a strong mantra around children and what we're trying to do there. But I think Richard and others have talked about it, having that purpose and that sense of purpose, if you can really instill that in people, where are we trying to get to rather than the next quarter, is really important.
Kate, you've actually got innovation in your job title, haven't you? So I'm going to ask you to pick that one up.
So it's something that we're particularly seeking to try and create an environment of entrepreneurs, and giving people the license and freedom. It goes back to this question about the freedom to fail. Part of the way that we're supporting that is we've created a facility, so there's a £25 million facility that anyone in the firm can tap into if they have a good idea. We've created discovery funding, we have support available. So there's a lot of work underway to get people and encourage them to be thinking in a different way. And they can be ideas that aren't necessarily related to their current role or their current business, but just something that's going to deliver a positive social or environmental benefit. And the offer is there, saying there's support, there's resource available, so come to us. So that's part of the way that we're seeking to drive that change. The short-term question, I think, is a good one, and I don't think that we're yet at the forefront of trying to tackle that. I think it's something that we're taking very seriously, because financial services, in particular, listed companies, you reference some of the structural barriers to allow us to be more forward-thinking. Multi-year targets, multi-year commitments is something that's ensuring that people are thinking beyond the calendar year. But I think that really instilling in everyone in the firm that they are responsible for the long-term health of the brand, the organisation, and that the decisions that they make today can create liabilities that they'll be responsible for and that will be carrying over into the future, I think is really changing the fundamental approach around where previously we might have been prepared to take trade-offs for short-term gain. Actually, a zero tolerance for anything that could create reputation risk, that it could fall short of meeting expectations of our stakeholders, is something that's really starting to pay dividends there, and people are acting as stewards in a way that we haven't seen before.
Thank you. I'm conscious of the fact that we've still got more questions in the audience, but we are running very tight for time now to allow you to have time to work at your round tables. So I'd just like to invite you to thank the panel, and then I'll hand over to Jim. So thank you all very much.